Sambhavi from Edict. We are the Arts and Culture Department. Edict is the independent student newspaper at Ashoka, as you know. So, getting into it, why H-pop? Like, why that term? Why did you choose to name whatever you were seeing, the whole thing, as H-pop?
Well, so I think our conceptualization of what pop is and what pop culture is that it's always something very benign, it's always entertaining, it's never anything beyond that.
Right.
You always look at pop culture as an escape almost from the drudgery of everyday life. And then when I saw what was happening on the ground, I thought this was the most important realization that I had.
Okay.
That pop culture had been weaponized to make it something else. And which is why I felt that part about the weaponization of something which is very mundane and something very benign has to be the highlight of what H-pop and what the ecosystem has managed to do.
Right.
So that was a primary reason behind me, calling my book H-pop. But the other was a bit more of a mischievous marketing related decision, which was essentially that everyone knows what K-pop is. Right? K-pop is the talk of the town. Across the country, across the world, people keep saying K-pop and referring to K-pop. And I thought, wait, hang on. I mean, there is K-pop, but then closer to home, we also have something else, which is very similar in the form that it seeks to entertain, it seeks to enchant, but yet the core values are very different.
Right.
And I thought we could play on the term K-pop, and that's how H-pop came to be, which was essentially Hindutva pop.
Okay. So, to begin with, I think you make films, right? So, I think there is a sort of creativity involved in that. So, what do you think about, music, which is a form of expression that being used for other motives than maybe what you might have used your creative inputs for? So, what did that kind of make you think or feel, or I guess that would be the starting point of the book as well. So if you could talk about that.
Honestly, it took me by surprise, because I think, as I said, our popular imagination, around entertainment, around pop culture, is that it's always supposed to be something, that as I said, is a form of escape.
Escapism.
It's not ever associated with an objective or with a motive in mind. So the minute I came to realize that it was actually pop culture was designed to further political objectives or to try and achieve a political meaning that they had associated with that pop culture, it took on a different level of gravitas in my mind. It was not just another song.
Right.
It was not just another book. It was just not another piece of poetry, because there was so much more that was going on in the creation of that pop culture. And I think that was very interesting for me in person, right? And it was this realization that I had that this was happening in India. And when I started, as they say, when you go down that rabbit hole, when I started looking deeper and deeper into this, is when I realized that actually this was not new at all. This was not a recent phenomena. This was not an India specific phenomena.
Right.
This was something that history has shown us time and again to be a very powerful way of radicalizing people, of achieving your political motives and your objectives.
Right.
And of popularizing a certain cause, which is to use popular culture forms, to use entertainment, to use various forms of expression, and then, almost imbibe them with a political meaning to it. We'd seen this in fascist Italy, we'd seen this in Nazi Germany, we'd seen this in the Rwandan genocide,
Right.
we'd seen this in the genocide of Rohingyas in Myanmar. So we'd seen various versions of the same thing playing out.
Right.
And that's when it started making a lot more sense to me that what we're seeing now in India is in some ways the extension of that trend.
Right.
And then that honestly blew my mind, because I started seeing so much of the mobilization that happens here in Hindutva on Hindutva causes very, very differently. I started seeing how there was so much popular support to those causes, and the reason behind some of that support, at least, was that it was using pop culture.
Right. So, like in all of these other contexts and countries, like there were different forms of media used, right? So my question is, in your book, you focused mainly on three artists and three forms of media. So what were your intentions behind that? Like why those and why not others?
That's a great question, Shambhavi. So I've said this, and I will sort of take you through some of it in the talk as well. But essentially, I stumbled upon this idea. It was not an idea that I knew of, or it was not an idea that I went seeking.
Right.
It was an idea that came to me when I was out reporting, and when I saw firsthand some of the effects that songs, which were essentially stoking feelings of Hindutva, which were essentially targeting different religious minorities, songs that were causing anger and hate to boil up among people. I saw that these songs were leading to real world effects, right? Real world effects like violence, real world effects like hate, like division among communities, and I saw this happening, which is why I organically moved towards songs as one medium that I wanted to look at. As far as the other two mediums are concerned, when I started looking at songs, the question that I had in my mind was, is music the only form which has been weaponized to achieve these objectives, or was it something more?
Right.
What I've always found is that, now with the internet playing such a big part in our role, in our lives, we often end up, sort of looking at the internet as the thing that will give us answers, right? So, for instance, right now, Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts are very popular, and you automatically think that people are just, sort of using those to consume all their information. And the question that my mind had at that point was, what happens in places where there is no internet, or where there is not such a high consumption of these formats, right? Because H-pop and the music is also spreading in a large part through YouTube. So the people who are not consuming the internet, who are not consuming YouTube, where are they getting some of these ideas from? And that's when that's the question sort of that played on my mind was exactly this, and the answer to this, in some ways, I found was when I looked at poetry, because in India, even now, especially in northern Western India, poetry recital sessions or Kavi Sammelans are still a very, very potent, a very popular form of mass entertainment. Right? Where sometimes hundreds and thousands of people come together under one roof and listen to poets performing poetry of their liking. And when I traveled down this route, when I traveled to different parts of the country to see what these Kavi Sammelans were, I found my answer that even within these Kavi Sammelans, poetry, or at least some part of the poetry that was being recited, had been weaponized to serve exactly the same purpose that Hindutva songs were serving. So that was the second format. And similarly, when I looked beyond poetry and music, I found that one part which had not been explored as much was the role that books were playing. Because we don't look at books as being the sort of the carriers of political ideology. And then when I started going down that route, I found there were publishing houses which were only focusing on publishing Hindutva content, or books that were pushing, the Hindutva agenda further and further. And I felt, and then, maybe I was wrong, but I felt at that point that all three of these formats were things that people didn't know enough about. And as a journalist, I wanted to sort of, I wanted to shine more light on these little known or lesser known formats and how they will be weaponized. So that's essentially how I went down this.
So we were kind of curious about how propaganda films are the ones that are most talked about when we talk about Hindutva, and we were curious about why not that. So
I mean, a couple of reasons. One is that propaganda films are rather well known. Right, they're playing in your theaters. Our Prime Minister watches them. His entire cabinet watches them. Our Prime Minister praises them. So at the highest level of discourse, this form of propaganda is spoken about. Right, it's being disseminated. It's being pushed. So it's not suffering from the same fate as these other lesser known forms are. The other thing is, with cinema, there is a lot of money involved. So there's a lot more effort that is put in to popularize these, which is not the case with the other three. Right? Because essentially what happens with these three formats, with books, with poetry, with music, is that these are essentially, sometimes lone wolf actors who are producing this in very, very limited budgets. These are people who are producing it in different parts of the country, often flying under the radar. Whereas with cinema, when it's produced, it's on the screens, it's playing in theaters. You can see ads on your YouTube, you can see ads on billboards. As I said, political leaders are talking about it. So it's everywhere. And I felt that as a journalist, I wanted to focus more on things which were lesser known. And not essentially end up, repeating repeating and rehashing stuff that was already known to people, which is propaganda as cinema.
Right.
Which is essentially why I made this distinction between these three forms in cinema.
Right. So, you said that funding and proliferation of film is kind of, it's well known and it happens like in front of our eyes. So my question was about these other forms of media and whether the funding and proliferation of these forms, do they have any political affiliations, or do they have, what else are they driven by? So
a couple of things. I mean, one is it's not as straightforward as some people think, where you can draw a line between the political organization and these artists and say, oh, here's where the money is coming from.
Right.
Okay? Because what's happened is with the internet, the funding models have been democratized. And what this means is that now the internet throws open the possibilities of different sources of funding coming for the same thing. So a YouTube is able to, you're able to monetize your content on YouTube, and you're able to draw in funding from the platform.
Right.
As far as music is concerned, you're also able to monetize your presence on Spotify, on Apple Music, on a host of other audio-only platforms, right? And essentially as a result of that, you're able to then get money from these different platforms. It's not only one platform.
Right.
Which was not the case previously, which people couldn't do. That's one aspect of it, which is that in all three formats, I've seen that there are various people who are trying to fund it. There are various platforms in place which are funding and incentivizing the creation of such content. In some cases, what does happen though is when there is an artist who is particularly popular in this ecosystem, he or she often gets platformed by political outfits. Right, so he or she is often invited to perform at political events where they get money, they're paid for it, they're flown across the country. In some of these events or in some of these organizations, they're often made the ambassadors. So they're flown to different parts of the country. They deliver speeches because they're popular with young people.
Right.
So that's the kind of patronage they see. So it's not always as simple as saying that they're funding these actors. It's often the case that these actors, be it singers, be it poets, are often climbing the ranks of popularity rather organically, and then at some point receiving the help of political outfits to ensure that they can go higher. And that's sort of the trajectory that I've often seen with some of these people.
Yeah. So since we're talking about the artists, so you again focused on three of them. So was the choice dictated by their popularity or something else?
Interesting question. So I think there were different factors at play in all the three. Popularity was one.
Right.
But for instance, with Kavi Singh, who's the singer, she's a woman. She's a young woman of 25 years old. And it's a bit of a rarity to have a woman in that world of Hindutva and Hindutva pop especially. And so she may not be the most popular out there, but she was set apart by her gender. Right? And the fact that she was a woman and she chose to be in this very masculine, male-dominated world.
Right.
And for me, that was a very interesting sort of thought, right? And which is why I wanted to find out why a 25-year-old woman from Haryana wants to be an H-pop singer, and sort of that drew me towards her. With other people, it was slightly different, which was that in case of Kamal Agne, who is the poet in the book who I profile, I just found his range to be quite versatile in terms of the number of different topics that he was touching upon as a poet
Right.
and writing poetry on. And I saw in some ways his virality. So he had recited some poems which had become very, very viral in the internet world, and it had brought him a lot of fandom. It had brought him stardom. He'd become a huge celebrity in that world of Hindutva poetry, and I wanted to sort of follow up on that. With Sandeep Dev, who is the third character of the book, and he's the book publisher.
Okay.
I just found that he does a number of things, and not just book publishing. So he runs, for instance, his own news channel or his news website. Actually,
Right.
and within his news website, he runs different things. So he offers an alternative streaming service for himself, where he's streaming on YouTube, but he's also having his own streaming platform. Right, so he's doing that. He has obviously a book publishing house where he's publishing books there. He also had plans, and I write about this in the book. He also had plans to start, essentially units or centers which would impart weapons training and arms training to young Indians and young Indian men, in fact, and also give them training of Indian scriptures or Hindu scriptures specifically. So he had all of these ambitious plans at that point, and he had started raising money. He had started firming up logistics, and I found it to be interesting how he was, while being a book publisher, had then branched himself out into so many different things. And I was interested in following his journey. So it was more of what I saw in all of these three people
Right.
that drove me. It wasn't as simple as just their popularity or how many likes or how many followers they had.
Right.
I just felt that they were very fascinating characters for me to follow and to learn more about, essentially.
Right. So, like, for a regular cynic, just saying, it's very easy to say that the connection between H-pop and the impact it can supposedly have on the streets, inciting hatred, violence, it's easy to say that it's just speculative. So I wanted to share from your research, from what you've seen, from your observations, some events that grounded that for you. So what are some of those things?
So, that's a great question, because often people struggle to sort of understand the impact, the real world impact that some of this hate propaganda has on lives of people on the ground. And the book unfortunately started off with one such illustration
Okay.
of the power of hate music on the ground.
Right.
I sort of had gone to cover a hate crime where a young Muslim man had been lynched to death because he was found with a Hindu girl
Okay.
in a small town in Jharkhand. And the interesting part is that he was essentially lynched by men who had just hours ago been dancing on a song which told them that Muslims were enemies, that Muslims had to be assaulted, Muslims had to be dealt with a firm hand. And then playing that song outside a mosque had almost created a riot just hours before the lynching. Right, so this happens, and then these men return to their villages, and they're so drunk on the rhetoric that the song and that moment had offered, that when they saw a Muslim man talking to a Hindu girl, they remembered the words that they had just heard.
Right.
And they ended up sort of thinking of him as the devil, as the enemy, and the enemy that had to be dealt with. And that's when they lynched him.
Right.
This is one instance, but across the country you'll find numerous instances, be it Maharashtra, be it Bihar, be it Uttar Pradesh, not very far from here, where there have been instances where music has now become a very integral and actually a core part of how riot is engineered, right? Which is that music and the provocative words and the incendiary words that this music contains is deliberately played outside of mosques, outside of Muslim religious places, sometimes outside of Muslim localities where Muslims are staying, and these words are then used to provoke the Muslims into some sort of an action. This has become a template of sorts, and you'll find this in instance after instance across the country, where when this happens, and it's immediately, it's almost like the people in the procession who play this music are waiting for a reaction from Muslims.
Right.
Because as soon as the reaction happens, there's a counter reaction, and that often results in a riot in different places. So we now have overwhelming evidence, Shambhavi, of exactly this kind of music triggering of violence in different parts of the country.
Right.
And which is why I say that, this kind of music has become the essential sort of ingredient for hate to be stoked, for violence to be triggered. And that is the unfortunate part of how this music is being weaponized across the country, not just in a specific part.
Right. So, from what I've read, even in communities that house both Hindu and Muslim populations who live together quite harmoniously, even like these sort of incidents happen even there. So my question is, if a Hindu majority like procession, anything that's going on, why do they feel the urge to play such loud music in front of a mosque if they live together with Muslims harmoniously? And that sort of builds into like what kind of audiences, and why do these audiences find such relatability or popularity with such music? So along with the artists that you worked with, did you also work with the audiences that are targeted?
No, that's a very interesting question, Shambhavi, because just look around for the last decade or more and look at the consumption of information that we've all been receiving, right? Be it on WhatsApp, be it on Facebook, be it on Twitter, now Instagram, any other platform, be it on YouTube. Very deliberately over the last few years, there has been an attempt to try and inject into the majority Hindu community of this country a deep sense of victimhood, right? A deep sense of being wronged by various actors, right? Wronged by Mughal emperors, wronged by Muslims of the community of the country, wronged by other religious minorities. That sense of victimhood has now been cultivated to such an extent that people have started feeling very aggrieved and hurt at this imagined sense of victimhood. Now, there's one process which is creation of this victimhood. The other process, which has almost simultaneously taken place, is the creation of a muscular sense of Hindutva, right? Which is to say that, look, we were victims back then, but we will not be victims now.
Right.
And this muscular sense of Hindutva is essentially designed to give it back to people who've wronged you in the past. It's essentially designed to almost avenge the imagined wrongs that the Hindu community perceives or they've been made to perceive, right? And in the process of avenging, how do you avenge, right? Because your everyday has to be in some form at least a coexistence, even if it's not completely harmonious. But as you said, right, if you're living in the same village, you can't go and abuse people, you can't go and sort of call them names on an everyday basis.
True.
So what essentially happens is that this kind of propaganda is constantly pushed into people, and it bottles up and it bottles up and it bottles up. And it only emerges in times when people are in large groups, because that's the mob's mentality. That when you're a part of the mob, Shambhavi, you will behave in ways that you never will otherwise. Because in a mob there is no accountability.
Right.
In a mob there is no single person. You're a part of a mob. So what often happens is when you're in the mob, you start thinking of, and that's when Hindutva music plays a role. Because Hindutva music in that procession, in that mob, makes you reimagine all of the injustices and the wrongs that have been committed against you, which you have anyway been consuming on your phone, on your TV and all of that.
Right.
So in that moment when you start reimagining all of these wrongs, and then when you have a mosque playing, it's almost like you're avenging some of this. Because you want to stand outside a mosque and then you want to play songs which abuse the Muslim, which make derogatory comments around it, or which tell you, there is a song which says, "Agar chua mandir to tujhe dikha denge, tujhko teri औकात bata देंगे." And this song is essentially played right outside the mosque, because the tu here is the mosque. The mosque is a symbol of the tu, which is the Muslim. So the song is also written with this moment in mind, right? Which is why this moment is such a great, I say, but of course in a problematic way. But it's a great confluence of the imagined wrongs, of that anger, and then being able to vocalize that anger into that moment. And that's what happens in that moment, and which is why, the question you asked is, why do mobs feel the need? They're avenging all of these wrongs in that moment, and Hindutva pop helps them vocalize some of these wrongs.
Right. So are the artists also coming from this place of victimization and that muscular identity of Hindutva, or is it just creative expression, or where are they coming from?
I think it's important we don't generalize it, and I try to not generalize it. So I believe the artists come from various places. I believe that some of the artists come from a place of carrying a genuine grievance in their hearts and minds, which is then being very tactfully weaponized to radicalize them into believing these things. But some others, see the ambition behind becoming an H-pop singer in this time and place, and they see how this can benefit them. So some carry, the skepticism or the cynicism of using some of this to their own advantage, right? So you have all kinds of artists. You have people who genuinely believe, but there are also people who believe that this is just a great moment to do this. You don't have to feel it. But because there are other people feeling it, I'm catering to a demand in the market.
Right.
So I think it's important that we look at all of them,
Right.
and not have a broad brush sort of judgment on any one side.
Okay. I'm curious about if you came across any counter narratives while doing your research. So maybe people or communities who maybe did not feel so close to this idea of music and H-pop and Hindutva, and any sort of counter narratives to what you're putting across in the book. So are there any movements like that?
No, lots of, Shambhavi. I mean, look, India has a very glorious tradition of protest music, of music that comes from the grassroots, right? So I travel a lot across the country, and I see that so many of the protest movements that we had, for instance, the Narmada Bachao Andolan, right? There was so much of organic protest music that came out of it. In fact, there's a very famous song called Ma Reva by a band called Indian Ocean. I don't know if you know them.
I know.
But they're one of my favorite bands, and that song Ma Reva is a song about the Narmada River, which the locals call Reva, and the song is about worshipping the river. So a lot of our protests have brought great protest music. They've got very fascinating slogans. There is graffiti. There's so much of interesting protest literature, which is essentially pitching a different idea of the country, a different idea of the fabric of society, as against what H-pop is proposing.
Right.
So there is a lot of that, but the difference essentially is that these are all happening in smaller pockets, whereas H-pop is now backed by the establishment. H-pop is now backed by some of the most powerful actors in the country, right? H-pop is directly sometimes funded, or at best, at least it's aided and abetted by some of these very, very popular political actors, be it political outfits, be it leaders, be it governments. And that's the kind of patronage that is missing on the other side. So there are counter sort of, there is counter pop culture that is being created, but that's happening in spurts, and that's happening in smaller pockets. So it's very difficult to think of it as a direct counter to the hegemony that H-pop almost right now enjoys, at least in certain parts of the country.
Yeah. So we spoke about India as well as other countries, but from what I understand, your book essentially covers central India and northern India, those areas. So my question is, are there any parallels to the H-pop movements or evidences of H-pop movements in the rest of India, the southern part of India, east?
Well, I mean, as you rightly pointed out, my book was, my book is essentially spread across 6 to 7 Indian states, but they're largely in the north, central, and parts of Western India. When I started traveling after the book was out, traveling to different parts of the country,
Right.
I traveled to places where, at least there was no evidence that H-pop was present till that point. But when I went to places like Hyderabad, when I went to places like Kolkata, I was told by native language speakers in these places that they had seen similar sounding, or at least songs with similar rhetoric in those specific regional languages as well.
Right.
And I feel like this is disturbing but predictable, because essentially H-pop has set a template that you can create art, you can create popular culture which targets these certain themes, and then just as it is popular in the Hindi language, it will achieve similar kind of popular appeal in different languages as well.
Right.
So I feel like as the Hindutva juggernaut rolls on across different parts of the country, and as its popular appeal increases, I also see that Hindutva pop will see an increase in its appeal, and it will have different regional variations, and I see the signs of it already.
Okay. Coming to during the process, I understand you wrote the book over a course of 5 years, I think. So during those times, what were the challenges kind of that you faced? And one specific aspect I was thinking about was about transparency. So was it difficult to ensure that there is transparency in what you're reporting? Were the artists and people you were interacting with hesitant about the sort of connections you were going through building in your book? Or was it not a challenge? And what are the other challenges apart from transparency?
Well, I mean, lots of challenges to begin with, and I mean, a book like this is difficult because it's basically trying to gain access into a world which is very deliberately operating from the shadows. And when I say operating from the shadows, what I mean is not that this world is, or at least the actors are not known. The actors are known, but some of the linkages in the ecosystem are not known, right? And it's their lives are not known. As you asked, the patronage that they receive is not known. So, to try and uncover that, or to try and understand that, also has its own challenges because it's being deliberately kept hidden from public sight. The other aspect is that my politics has been very different, and I have never been someone who has even remotely felt some of the political sort of sentiments that these H-pop artists carry, right?
Okay.
I believe in the idea of India which is equal for all, which is secular, which is a pluralistic country, which takes every citizen along, where the weakest of the citizens has an equal right to everything as the strongest of them. And which is why I found it very, very difficult to be able to digest some of the feelings that all of these artists had. So the book comes with challenges of how to learn to put your own feelings aside and be able to focus on the task at hand, which is a very important reminder in these times for all of us journalists, right? Which is that no matter what your political ideologies, no matter what your beliefs are, no matter what your sentiments are, you have to stick true to the story. You have to be able to get in, do what it takes to get the story out, because the story is more important than you are. or your political beliefs are.
Mm.
So the access was difficult. Getting the access was difficult, but then also staying in that space was difficult, right?
Right.
Because you had to be in and out. You had to spend days and weeks and months tailing people and being in spaces where the idea of India was a very, very different idea. Where there was a lot of anger, where there was a lot of hate, where there was also violence. And by violence I mean violent speech against fellow citizens. So it was very, very challenging to sometimes keep believing and keep being optimistic about the country also. But as I said, I think you just go back and tell yourself that you must endure, not because you're a superhero or you're whatever, but because you're just an ordinary reporter who's out there to do your job. You're nothing more than that, and I think that kind of humility is extremely important to have for journalists, especially in times where journalists have increasingly made the story about themselves. Right? People go out reporting and then they present that reportage to be an act of courage. And I think it's fair if other people believe that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know where I was. I
Uh,
was just saying, the humility. I mean, I was just saying that I think in these times when we're living in very, very divisive and polarized environments, when we're living in times where the social media almost sort of goads and encourages you and prods you to become the hero of your life, I think as journalists we must resist that, and we must resist that because we're not the hero, we're not the story. What our job is to bring the story home.
right.
So that it's just a reminder that I constantly kept. And in fact, one of the things that I did was I almost didn't click any photos of me, of me being in those spaces and reporting, because that wasn't something that that wasn't something that came naturally to me. Whereas these days the trend is that no matter where a reporter goes, they have 10 photographs, they shoot a reel, walking in a village and so on. And I've just never felt comfortable with that. I mean, I don't feel like that's our job, In fact, I love being a fly on the wall, because I think that is really where your tact is as a reporter. Can you invisibilize yourself, and can you just be absorbed by your surroundings so that you can then take in whatever is happening around you.
It's a really nice thing, I think. You spoke about democracy, like India being equal, right? So, like, to end with this, my question is, do you think in a democratic country, how should this expression of artists, like through music, through publications, through Kavi Sammelans, and how should that be kind of not dealt with, but should that be held responsible for the violence it causes, both physical and through speech, or so should they be held responsible, or what kind of action can there be to make sure that there is it doesn't incite it, like
It's a very good question, and in fact, people who talk about freedom of speech, and this is one of those classic sort of debates that one has about democracies like ours, is that where does your freedom of speech end, right? And then what is the red line that one must draw?
right.
Because as you're saying, what they're essentially saying is their opinion,
Right.
of what the country must be, of how the country must look, what they feel about a certain class of people, a certain sect, a certain faith, and this is the argument that a lot of people like the H-pop singers, like the H-pop stars make, which is that what we're saying is a part of our freedom of speech, freedom of our expression,
Right.
and just like everyone else has the right to criticize us, we have the right to say what we like, which I think is a fair argument.
Right.
Till the point where they're actively promoting division where they're stoking hate against fellow citizens just because they believe in a different faith, just because they belong to a different religion. To constantly sort of stoke a feeling of anger and hate, and to goad people into violence against them, I think is where you draw the line, because it's anyway something that our legal framework, right? That the BNS at this point also has provisions which basically will jail you and me if you are found to be promoting enmity between different groups on the basis of their language, their caste, or their religion. And I feel like under that framework, when you're creating a piece of art, when you're creating a piece of music, poetry, books, cinema, but if it's actively encouraging people to discriminate between religions, if it's actively encouraging people to hate on people of a different faith, then I think that is the red line that I would like to draw. Because then it will, if not today, then tomorrow, lead to an act of violence.
Right.
If not today or tomorrow, it will lead to an act of division among people. And the thing with hate, Sambhavi, is that hate can be like a slow dripping tap.
Right.
It's not something that's going to come to your notice right then. It's not like busting a firecracker. It is something that takes sometimes weeks and weeks, sometimes months and months, sometimes years and years of slow radicalization before it can express itself in an outburst. So the question is, do we wait till there is an outburst, or do we sort of shut the tap before it's too late? And I think my response is very, very simple. The minute it starts discriminating between people on the basis of their religion, and the minute it starts advocating violence against people on the basis of caste, language, and especially religion, then I think there is that red line.
Right. Thank you so much for that. It was a lovely conversation.
Thank you for your questions. I had a very tough time fielding them, but thank you for your very, very interesting questions, and all the best.
Thank you so much.